what would a tutorial be? Because we were asked to give a tutorial, and I thought like 2 hours with a group of about 10 to 20 people. And a tutorial for me is something very interactive. So usually I would ask you to do a design exercise and then reflect on it, and through that, you know, use that as a starting point to have a discussion. I think that's going to be kind of bothersome. So if you allow me, I'd like to get a couple of concepts out of the way. Then present some examples of projects that we do, and then hopefully have a good amount of discussion, because a lot of the topics that came up in the presentation with Sandra, like I largely agree with them, and then with some I kind of disagree. But also in the discussions, like for instance, what is a career path for a researcher in a University of Applied Sciences? Really, really interesting. And I haven't prepared my presentation around that, but if we can talk about that, wonderful. So, tutorial. I also have no idea what you would like to get out of the next 30 minutes or so. So, just to get a quick sense of what would make you really excited, what would make you really happy that if you walk out for lunch in about an hour, what would you like to have gained? And then we'll see if we can if I can oblige. But just to take some notes. Do you have any ideas? What would you like to hear from me in the next half hour?
Why are you here?
Why me, right? Okay. What else?
How can you help us?
How can I help? Okay. Excuse me.
Okay, you serve between masters, the real and the deal.
Yeah, I kind of got a bit poetic in late at night proposing this tutorial, so I'll get to that. Yeah. Surf masters.
What is our problem? Because you can help us if you don't understand our problem. And our problem is not how to do it. Sorry.
It's how to get the money to do it, actually.
Probably now we are starting
that's
to get
very-
paid to do what we usually do.
That's a
But
really good point.
it's very complex
Yeah.
to pack, you know.
So my assumption.
My opinion is you can't help us.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's all about you. You are a nice guy. You can go surf there.
Thank you so much. Well, at least we have that out of the way, right? No, thank you. So, okay, so the assumption was, my assumption was that you in the polytechnics are very much educational institutions with the teaching staff, kind of getting their first toes wet into the, I don't know, this, into research. But boy, am I wrong, right? So my assumption has changed. I think most of you have quite a research background, and now are dipping into your toes into practice, and are struggling more with that than the other way around. And some people nod yes, and some people no. So I think that's wonderful.
We are also struggling with the money, actually.
The money.
I'm sorry to be so,
Okay,
sorry to
good.
be so blunt, but that's the end point. We have done research, we have done basic research, all of us, when we've been through our university education.
Yeah.
So where's the money?
We have,
Can't help you with that, but I can give some perspective.
yeah, many of us have years of doing things with industry and other kind of entities. We have basically two struggles in polytechnics in Portugal. Where are we going to get the students, and where are you going to get
action findings, and they say it's not action, it's research. So, so I quit.
Okay, so to start with the first one, oh sorry, I forgot you.
I was expecting to know what is important to be in the project, for the project with the finance. What is important to put in the project?
Right. So
How do we build the project? What's
yeah.
important to be financed?
And that's really from the Portuguese perspective, right? So you come here because you have a project idea and you want to get insights on how to fund it. Am I right?
Things that key points to get funded. Yes. Here or in the Netherlands? Here. The referee that will evaluate the project.
Yeah.
What the rights.
Okay. So I don't know about that. That's for some other people. What I can give are some Dutch perspectives, and I will try to stay away from saying, okay, this is the way how you do it, right? Because that's not what you're here for. And I'd also like to learn from you. Okay, so I'm one of these lectors. So internationally, I position myself as professor of co-design. So my field is involving people in everyday people in design processes, and I do a lot of like methodological research on that in very real day-to-day projects. Just a little bit about, okay, so this is me. What's interesting, I think, for this is that I have a background from Delft University of Technology. I worked there for quite a while. And in doing my research, I more and more was involved with working with companies. And at the research university, I got evaluated, and they really said, like, okay, why do you need to do that? This is like 10 years ago, right? A lot has changed in the Netherlands. But they say, why don't you just focus on doing experimental research, and then because then you can publish in like real journals, and then I got this opportunity to work at a polytechnic. And these research positions had just been installed, and I kind of like to explore and to kind of find my way into new areas. So I thought, okay, let's go for it. And what I really like about it is that we have the freedom to find and develop impact in different areas. So both in practice and in research and in education. So it's not just about publication points. What I find quite difficult is how to. What I really loved at Delft University of Technology was that you could explore and learn together with the students. You had these kind of inquisitive minds where you would have research projects, and together you would learn and find something totally different from what you would set out with in the beginning. Now at our polytechnic, it's much more, you have to be a little bit more directive. Say, okay, we're going to do research, or we're going to develop this product or service, and let's do that and work that way. So this kind of explorative attitude is not inherent in the students, but also not in the teaching staff. And I think that's one of the biggest biggest challenges. What else? I did my PhD, the sketching and design idea generation meetings. That's my PhD book. So I'm a facilitator of creative processes, and I like to reflect on that and publish on that, and that's kind of my area of research. So we've done quite a few projects, and also in these very practical settings, trying to reflect on that, and in such a way that you can create knowledge, and also to express it to others so that other people can use it. So I wanted to say a little bit about our university, a little bit about my view or views of the university on practice-oriented research, a little bit on design research or research through design, and then some examples. But before I can really go into that, these three masters, how about that? And because some of you were curious, I hope you don't mind. I think this works, right? Yeah. We'll need this a little bit later too. Just as an example, what is this? Cup? On the table. A cup on the table, right? What?
Something up.
Something up? Okay.
No, up. Artistic.
Oh, it's art. Well, if it were art, I think it would be like this, right? So, just suppose this is a phenomenon. As a designer, you work with phenomena and try to make things better. And if you're doing design research or like a designerly way of doing research, is to be involved in a process and do it and try to find grounding. Pretty much like the action research, right? You find grounding. And there are three ways of finding this grounding. The real, the truth, and the ideal. So, if you're talking about, if you're serving the truth, then you look at a coffee cup, but there are more coffee cups. And you look at what's in Holland. This is a coffee cup too. And you're trying to find the generality of it. What do they have in common? So you can exploit and use that common knowledge later. So what do they have in common?
We can put
Coffee
coffee.
is missing
You
in
can
all
put
of them.
coffee in it.
The coffee is missing in all of them.
Coffee is missing, that too. You're white and right, etc., etc., etc. Now, so so you create, from these kind of analysis, you create general knowledge. My assumption is that you're really, generally speaking, you guys are really well trained in that, thinking of validity, thinking of generality, reliability. Maybe more in your style. This is action research. You could also look at it from, okay, so that's the real, right? The truth. You could also look at this particular cup. What makes this cup different from any other cup in the world?
It's there.
It has been used. How do you notice that it's being used? It's a little bit wobbly. There's some coffee stains, a unique pattern of coffee stains. This coffee cup is standing in a certain context. You know, at this particular table, at this particular moment, this coffee cup is getting a lot of attention right now. By about 120 people. It's a famous cup. So understanding the phenomenon as it is in its context is another way of doing research, and and of grounding. So it's looking for the real. What's this in reality? So the quotes that you gave of these teachers, that's kind of grounding in reality. And then there's a third way of kind of grounding your research, and that's looking at the ideal, like what could be. So, if this is a coffee cup, what would be the ideal coffee cup for you? A couple of ideas? Black? Okay, a black coffee cup. What else? Ceramic. Okay, yeah. Ceramic, black. What else?
It would maintain the temperature for...
Okay, so maintain temperature.
Never ending coffee.
Never ending coffee. Don't burn your finger. Maybe you could combine that with
Mind of the mouse.
What's that?
Mind of the mouse. Don't burn the mouse.
Don't burn the mouse. Okay. So, what you hear is all these different ideas coming up. You could categorize these ideas. You could lay them against criteria. And from that way, create kind of a knowledge structure towards the future, towards what could be. And for me, design of doing a kind of evidence-based way of design is using those three masters as a way to ground and to make sure that what you're creating has some kind of solid base, rather than just an insight of an artist. So that's really the basic of research for design for me. Okay, going back, this is myself doing a tutorial for small kids. I'd rather be doing this with you. University of Applied Sciences. So just a very quick screenshot of what we are. 30,000, about 3,000 bachelor students, 3,000 master students. These master students are professional masters, so they typically have to have at least 5 years of professional experience, and these masters are not funded by the government. So they have to bring quite a bit of money, and usually the company pays partly. So we get a very practice-oriented kind of masters in our institutions.
Yeah, but that's not our reality.
This is our reality.
Companies pay masters in Portugal. That reality does not.
So in Portugal, companies don't.
Companies are bankrupt, so they don't have money to pay students.
Right.
So that's not the question.
Right.
We have to go.
Excuse me? But,
Okay.
hello?
That's not the way for us.
Right.
Sandra, I'm also from a nursing school in Porto. Sometimes companies, and I'm talking about hospitals and primary healthcare centers, have some facilities to do research. In my school, we have those experiences because they can facilitate rooms and then can facilitate the settings so we can do research.
Right.
Sometimes our problem is to show everybody the outcomes that we reach and that we can achieve with the research.
Right.
And that's how we need to develop this.
So what my assumption would be is that all these project-based educational activities have the potential of being knowledge-generating engines, really. Like the cheese maker, or designers, so I work a lot with the design organizations, design agencies, but also with hospitals and energy companies. So companies who usually are who usually hire design agencies.
How do you measure that impact?
And yeah, that's a good question. And I promised that I wasn't going to solve. Yeah, it's a really good question. For now, we look at. We have to determine ourselves like what kind of activities would create impact, and then have to report on that. But we don't have. I also think that we don't have like really neat skills or instruments for that.
Can I reformulate that? Do you have agreed to make the evaluation of those contributions to education and practice and research, or is just open to the evaluation team? Is that correct? Yeah.
I think that there are general criteria, and then we have to develop our own ways of saying, okay, how much have we
have some indicators?
You have indicators. Is it your institution that creates them?
We have
Who established them?
right. It's an interesting question because I personally am not. Wait, 1 second, please.
Who
1 second,
evaluates
please.
you?
1 second, please. We have. I'm typically not very interested in indicators, to be honest. But you are, and I should be because I'm evaluated by it. What we have is our school has these policymakers who develop these instruments, and all University of Applied Sciences together create like a general instruments so that you can compare across polytechnics. How you then use them in your evaluation is very much a dialectic and very much about contextualizing it. But it's not really my area of expertise.
Can I just comment on that? Because
It's hers.
so the research in the Netherlands is evaluated on every 6 years, and it's evaluated internally by the institution now. They have to hire external committee members that are from the field. There is a person that is independent consultant, teacher from another University of Applied Sciences, and one professor.
Another University of Applied
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got it, okay?
Yes. I
Because
know.
we are not evaluated by people inside the polytechnic system. That is the problem.
Yeah.
And our this evaluation, the scale differs for the different institutions. You can decide whether it be for one evaluation for the whole institute, or just for one professorship, or you know.
But the problem is that they're also struggling in the Netherlands. They're also struggling with indicators. So they also don't have clear indicators of how to evaluate research. I've talked with Julho, which is like our CISH, like Council of Polytechnic. They're the ones that define policy and indicators, and then institutions have to do this evaluation. But they're very much struggling with the same issue as you are, because what's happening in the Netherlands is quite the opposite than we have in Portugal. We here are very good in academic research, and we do this practice-based research which is not evaluated. We produce papers because that's what's valuable. There it's the opposite. They do practice-based research, less publications, they don't have much academic knowledge, so the situation is reversed. So what Remko is going to show, what Professor Peter Jore is going to show in Hankrozet, is basically how you can use practice-based research and also have academic outputs which can be valuable. So I think that's something to understand. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to cut you off because I had to get my thinking straight. Do you have done? Okay. If you don't mind, we'll move on. I also hear from you that you're really kind of greedy about understanding indicators and also how I can, develop my project. meets those standards. So I'm not going to give you a lot of that, but probably other people will. Okay, practice-oriented research, just a sense. 10 years ago when I entered the Polytechnic, it was just, we called making a cheesemaker, that was the research that we did. For me, that's just a design project, and it's very much about this reflective activity, which makes it something that you can call research and generates knowledge. For that, you know, you have these two basic criteria of quality. On the one hand, you have rigor, scientific rigor or otherwise, and on the other, you have relevance. And traditionally, these kind of conflict. In order to make something more relevant, you have to sacrifice the scientific rigor. You can't do immediately experimental study in a laboratory on a cheesemaker, especially how it's being used. So if you want criteria where you traditionally have reliability and validity, things that you can look at very much when you're looking at practice-based research are things like, is there a precise plan, and how secure are you reflecting and collecting data? Is there an explicit design of the research? How are you going to, and does that meet the question at hand? And this sense of transparency, you can't replicate the whole process of creating a cheesemaker because you will end up with something very different. It's an open-ended kind of question. So instead it is much more useful to create transparency and clarity about what was the process that led to that cheesemaker. Sorry, I keep using your example. On the other hand, you have relevance. And relevance means very much about, okay, is it clear when this new knowledge can be used and by whom it can be used, in what circumstances? Does it actually contribute to practice? Was the question created together with practice? And does it lead to something new and something new that can be implemented? And you know, this stream from fundamental knowledge towards contextualized practical use of that knowledge, you can call evidence-based practice or grounded practice. And the other way around, you have practice-based evidence, which is just as useful. And this is the field that you're playing with. Okay, it's hard to skip. Okay, I'm going to skip that. Research through design, this is by Peter Stappers. The statement that he made, he's a professor at Delft University of Technology, that whenever you're designing something new, you take this knowledge from different domains and in this kind of vortex, bring it into something new. And in that spin-off, knowledge spins off towards the disciplines again. But it requires a clear and secure process on grasping that new knowledge that comes out of it. So really, that's kind of where we're playing. And I think it fits this practice-based research very well. Because oftentimes you're trying to improve something in practice, and from that create new knowledge that is to be used in a more general sense. Okay, fun part, examples. But what I really want to show you is how we've been playing with this kind of challenge of creating something more than just design projects. and how to develop this knowledge. So I'll first use my little table to kind of set up how we try to do it, and then I'll give some examples of the context in which we do it. So, was this yours? It was. Okay. So this is a company. And here's another company. And there's a company. What we used to do was have student projects, you know, and they go into these companies and they work together with companies and create wonderful things. Sometimes you have also research staff. So for instance, you have 30 people in a class, and then you have researchers or teachers who supervise these projects and go to the companies every once in a while to kind of align the project. And every once in a while, the students would come to the teacher and they would talk about the project. That's kind of the baseline. What we try to do is we try to enter a research question, and usually a research that's involved with it. And we try to draw in the companies and to entice them to also get interested in this research question. But most of all, we try to get these teachers interested in research questions, which is not an easy deal. Because teachers in Holland are very interested in teaching, and sometimes they see research as something additional to their already heavy workload. So it's very much about getting them interested in learning again. Because really, what's research besides learning about new things? So this is the kind of setup that we get, where students work in different companies on different areas, but with a similar research question added. So there's a practice-based question: make a cheesemaker, create a new toilet or a coffee cup. But then a question could be, in what ways can we involve stakeholders in this process, along the whole design process, for instance? And so we create this kind of atelier or lab kind of environment where you both work in the context, but also together reflect on our learnings together. And we've been playing with that in different ways. I'd like to show a couple of examples. But we even have research staff, a teacher researcher, who did his PhD with this kind of, actually two with this kind of setup. Let's make it clear again. Okay. I try to be very fancy here. These are just 5 projects that are somewhere in that triangle of research, education, and practice. And really, all our projects have those 3 elements. I'm just going to use one example because I think I don't have a lot of time anymore. We do a project, a 2-year project funded by there's a funding institution called CIAS, Foundation of Innovation, and it aims to bring research together with small medium enterprises. In the beginning, it was very much about creating new products, but it has been taken over by the Dutch Science Foundation. So it becomes, you need to be more and more scientific in creating the process. So our question here was a nurse from research hospital in Groningen. She did her PhD on the foods intake and movement of children with cancer. And she found that throughout the process of going through treatment, kids typically end up with a very low amount of muscle mass and a very high amount of fat in their bodies. Not necessarily becoming heavier, but very low muscle mass. So the challenge was, okay, how can we help these children, even if they feel very sick, to eat healthily and to move. And this is another research research hospital in Nijmegen, and somewhere the directors thought we need, movement is important for these children with cancer, so let's create a playground. And what do you notice? Oh, wonderful. Usually people say, oh, it looks nice, happy, sunny. There's no kids. Do you have an idea why there would be no kids? What's that?
You cannot be on the outside, probably.
They can't be outside? Yeah. What else? It's not for them? What else?
They're ill.
What's that?
They're ill.
They're ill, yeah.
They're bothered too sick to go and play.
If you go to a hospital these days, you don't feel so well. So, so it was actually intended for the children with cancer, but typically brothers and sisters use it. Because if you're that's the big challenge. You're sick. It's really hard to get out of your bed anyway. So that was the challenge. This is a larger program together with Delft University of Technology and this Dutch Central Cancer Children's Cancer Center. And for us, what's really interesting, sorry it's Dutch, I had to be a bit quick, is that when we think about movement and food intake for children with cancer, we just tend to, look at the patient, the kids, and then poke and push and entice. How can you make sure that they move more and eat better? But there's a lot of other stakeholders involved that together make a system in which these intervention might work or might not. And that was really the challenge. My methodological question was about, okay, how do you design together with all these people at the right times in order to make something that's really going to lift off. And I think this is, again in Dutch, this is the research design that we've chosen, which has been quite successful in getting grants from these research institutions. So what we're saying is, like in the middle line you have this design innovation process, but we develop the research method is very much about being reflective in the process and feeding existing knowledge into this design process and taking these reflections out. And through that you can publish. So the topics about content knowledge is about what happens with children with cancer along the process, and how and what's the dynamics of food intake and movement. you can publish in the oncological papers for that. We have done that. On the lower part is the process knowledge. Okay, how to design or get sense of the context of what's happening with these children in a very precarious situation where you can't just go and ask and observe. So you need to be very sensitive with them. And those you can report in scientific design journals. And the middle one is very much about, good and best practices.
Something. I think there is missing a very important aspect regarding your research design, which is before moving forward the solution, I think it is important to ask people what they like. And regarding the children, for example, if you ask them, would you like to go outside and ride the whole road, probably say no, and it's so weak. So before moving to the solution, I think we need to listen to what people in fact
Well, it's actually, but that's one thing that I think designers bring into these domains, because that's the first thing that we do. We've talked with children, with families. We do these kind of generative activities where we ask people what are, who they are, what feels close to them, what feels far away. We collect these stories and these images, and from there, that's a starting point of a design process. So very much starting with getting a sense of the reality and bringing that in. But also, this is an energy meter which a student of ours developed, but has been accepted in quite a few of these hospitals. And just getting a sense of, okay, whereabout in this energy level are you? And be able, as a talking kind of mechanism. Okay, gotcha. And we've been exploring, together with design agencies, these different kind of interventions that were grounded in what we saw that the needs were. So, for instance, the blocks these are blocks, not that exciting, except that they are aimed to transfer the bed into something not so, that doesn't afford lying so much, but more sitting in more dynamic positions or playing. And it's really intended for children who are like really low in energy, and just to break through that sense of blurriness. It's intended for. Now, I don't think this was not intended to create a product that would be successful in the market, but to learn about in which ways can you kind of break through the blurriness, the inertia that you find. Another project is about learning to taste again. In treatment, very often just like when you have a fever, your taste is different. So things that you used to like are not good anymore. So it's a very big pitfall is that you kind of lose your connection with food. So this is a game that has that helps parents and children to together discover food again. This is a startup company now by some of the students who created it. And this is kind of like a race, a game mats where children who are really, really sick still can do a little bit of movement in gaming. I really disliked this product because it's just a game and it's just a game console. But the children really like it, and physiotherapists love it, and they love to use it. So it's also my assumption of, okay, I know that being there, but still for them it was very useful. So this is another startup company now. And what we find here, the last comment about this project is, this was a project of 2 years where we have done about 15 of these kind of design interventions to learn about the phenomenon and learn about the process of design together. We have 2 startup companies from that. But at some point, 2 kind of interesting things happened to reflect on. One is that in the beginning, when we came there, nothing was possible in that world. So they knew that it would be good for parents to cook together with the children, to keep this tradition of eating together alive. But everybody said, all the nurses said, okay, that's not allowed. Why? Because it's not allowed. Because there's some rules, but nobody could really say which rule. What we see happening in over the past 2-3 years that we've worked together is that there has become much more an attitude of looking at what's possible. And you see all the nurses also starting with new initiatives themselves. I don't know whether you can attribute that to our projects, but it happened at the same time. Another thing is that these startup companies, and also the oncologists, you create a prototype in order to learn, and at some point it switches to become an intervention that needs to become reality. And there's some kind of a trade-off sometimes, because the prototype that creates maximal learning could be quite different from the prototype that could be into something produced in the world and for a maximum amount, useful for a maximum amount of people. So we see that sometimes conflict start there. Okay, closing off. It does bring a lot to think of these design research projects in that manner. Also, it helps to create connection with these people who are rooted in the real, the nurses, the researchers, and also the designers. The second one I just discussed. The third one was utilize the students' strengths. And what we have in Utrecht is like 30,000 students. We have a lot of students. And when I first started, I tried to engage them all in these explorative activities. And sometimes I got quite frustrated. But now sometimes we do a project with 100 electronic students about navigation for elderly without screens. And you get this kind of scattergun approach of like 100 ideas of 100 prototypes, of which like 80% is like in the middle, but you get some interesting ideas. So it's like an exploration of solution space. You can be quite strategic in that. Engaging the students in these projects. So for instance, with child oncology, a lot of these students were kind of dull from having had 2 or 2.5 years of classes of technology, and they didn't really know what use it was. But now they see that it helps children in their who are very, very vulnerable, and that really creates a lot of energy for them. And also that was the hook that we finally found in engaging the teachers. Because also the teachers really like to be seen and be useful in the world. So that helps us to connect these teachers with the research domain. And the structural reflection on action. We have periodical reflection meetings, but especially the in-action. So when you're inside the design process, it's really difficult to step out of it and to write things down because you want to go on. You're in a flow.
5 minutes are over.
Yeah, I'm finishing. So you really need to be quite determined in getting this data out of the process. And if you have any ideas of how to do that, I'd be more than welcome to listen to you. Thank you very much.